My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 35 years old, and until last spring, I believed I knew exactly where I stood in my family. I was the dependable daughter. The one everyone called when paperwork became confusing. When hospital bills needed sorting. When emotions got messy. Or when someone else needed to be rescued. I never questioned that role. I thought it meant I was loved. I just didn't realize, being needed and being valued are not always the same thing. Everything changed during what should have been an ordinary family celebration. A dinner. A birthday cake. A simple conversation. And one innocent question from my grandmother that froze an entire room. A question so unexpected that every smile around the table disappeared before anyone answered. 3 days later, I opened a forgotten envelope hidden inside my mother's dining cabinet. It had my name written across the front. The handwriting belonged to my grandmother. The envelope had never been opened. Neither had the truth inside it. By the time that letter reached my hands, my family had already built an entire life on a lie. And before it was over, someone was going to lose far more than money. Welcome to Hidden Chapters, where the quietest voices often hide the strongest stories. If you've ever felt like the responsible one, the person everyone depends on, only to discover your loyalty was taken for granted, then this story might stay with you long after it ends. I work as a pediatric intensive care nurse in Columbus, Ohio. For nearly 13 years, I've watched frightened parents pray beside hospital beds. I've learned how quickly life can change. I've learned how people react when they're afraid. Most importantly, I've learned that emergencies are easy. It's everyday disappointments that slowly wear people down. One Monday morning, after finishing another exhausting overnight shift, I found a notice taped to my apartment door. Rent increase. Another one. It wasn't devastating. Just another reminder that working harder didn't always mean moving forward. I carried the letter inside. Fed my old orange cat, Oliver. Made coffee. Opened my budget spreadsheet. Removed another small luxury. Cancelled another streaming service. Shifted another payment. Problem solved. That's what I always did. I solved problems. Especially everyone else's. My younger sister, Emily, called whenever she needed help filing taxes. Dad called whenever insurance companies confused him. Mom asked me to organize every family document because I was good with details. I never minded. Helping became my identity. Until I realized nobody ever asked who was helping me. That weekend my parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Naturally, I organized everything. Reservations. Decorations. Food. Cake. Invitations. Nobody assigned me those jobs. They simply waited. Because everyone assumed Claire would handle it. And I always did. The dinner looked perfect. Warm lights. Soft music. Fresh flowers. Family laughter floating through the dining room. My grandmother, Eleanor, had flown in from Arizona 2 days earlier. She was 83. Sharp. Observant. The kind of woman who noticed things long before everyone else. She hugged me tightly when she arrived. Then whispered something strange. "You look more tired than you admit." I laughed. Changed the subject. She didn't. She simply watched me. The way experienced nurses watch monitors. Looking for changes nobody else notices. At dinner, everyone seemed happy. Dad told old stories. Mom corrected every detail. Emily talked excitedly about repainting the living room in her beautiful new house. Everyone complimented her decorating ideas. I smiled. Then joked. I'd settle for a landlord who doesn't raise my rent every year. Everyone laughed. Except Grandma. She slowly placed her fork on the plate. Looked directly at me. Then looked at my mother. The room suddenly felt smaller. Finally, she asked, "So, Claire, how are you enjoying the house I bought for you?" Silence. Not awkward silence. Terrifying silence. I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What house?" No one answered. Mom grabbed the water pitcher with shaking hands. Dad suddenly became fascinated by the window. Emily stared at her plate. Nobody looked surprised. Only frightened. Grandma frowned. Then smiled politely. "Oh dear. Perhaps I'm mixing things up." She laughed softly. Everyone immediately laughed with her. Conversation returned. Dessert arrived. Music continued. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because one thing became painfully clear. Grandma had made a mistake. Everyone else already knew exactly what she was talking about. And somehow, I was the only person at that table who didn't. Grandma didn't say another word for the rest of dinner. She smiled when everyone else smiled. She complimented the dessert. She laughed at my father's old fishing story. To anyone watching, nothing seemed unusual. But I couldn't stop replaying her question. "How are you enjoying the house I bought for you?" Every time I looked around the table, I caught someone avoiding my eyes. My mother suddenly found endless dishes to wash. Dad volunteered to take out the trash. Emily stayed unusually quiet. Even the room itself felt different. Like everyone was waiting for the evening to end. When guests finally started leaving, Mom announced that Dad would drive Grandma back to her hotel. Grandma adjusted her coat and shook her head. "No," she said calmly. "Claire will take me." It wasn't a request. It was a decision. For a split second, Mom looked like she wanted to object. Instead, she forced a smile. "Of course." The drive to the hotel was almost silent. Streetlights slid across the windshield while rain tapped softly against the glass. I kept waiting for Grandma to explain herself. She didn't. Not until we parked outside the hotel entrance. She turned toward me. Her expression had completely changed. The warm grandmother who'd laughed over birthday cake was gone. In her place sat a woman who looked painfully disappointed. "Claire," she said quietly, "I'm going to ask you one question." I nodded. "What color is your front door?" I stared at her. "I live in an apartment." She closed her eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. When she finally opened them again, they were filled with something I had never seen before. Not confusion. Not sadness. Betrayal. They lied. Those two words barely rose above a whisper. But they landed like thunder. She invited me upstairs. Inside her hotel room, she opened a leather folder she'd carried since arriving. Everything inside was neatly organized. Receipts. Wire confirmations. Property documents. Closing statements. She slid one paper toward me. At the top, in bold letters, was an address I had never seen before. Below it, a purchase price, $212,000. Paid in full. No mortgage. No bank loan. Then she pointed to a handwritten note attached to the documents. For Claire's first home. My heart stopped. I sold your grandfather's ranch 18 months ago, Grandma said softly. I wanted to see my grandchildren settled while I was still here to enjoy it. She smiled sadly. Emily already had so much help over the years. So this one, she touched the papers gently, was supposed to be yours. I looked back at the documents. Then at her. I've never seen these before. I know. She reached into her purse, pulled out an old envelope. My name was written across the front. In her handwriting. Still sealed. I mailed this to your mother after closing. I told her to give it to you when she handed over the keys. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter. My dearest Claire. If you're reading this, then you're standing inside a home that belongs to you. No landlord. No rent increases. No asking permission. Your grandfather always believed every hardworking person deserved one place in the world nobody could ever take away. This is yours. May every sunrise through your windows remind you that someone believed in your future. Love always. Grandma. The tears came before I realized I was crying. Not because of the house. Because until that moment, I never knew someone had planned a future for me. A future I'd never received. Grandma quietly handed me another document. County property records. The owner's name appeared in bold letters. Emily Harper. My younger sister. The house meant for me. Had belonged to her for over a year. I felt sick. I don't understand. Grandma nodded slowly. Neither do I. She explained everything. Mom had volunteered to handle the purchase because traveling had become difficult after Grandma's hip surgery. She trusted her completely. Transferred the money. Signed every authorization. Then waited for my phone call. It never came. Whenever she asked about the house, Mom always had an answer. Claire's busy. She's decorating. She wants to surprise you. She's overwhelmed. She'll invite you soon. One excuse became another. Weeks became months. Months became more than a year. Every conversation built another layer onto the lie. Grandma believed she was respecting my privacy. Instead, she was protecting their secret. Finally, she looked directly into my eyes. I've spent 18 months wondering why my granddaughter never thanked me. I couldn't speak. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I don't blame you anymore. Then her voice hardened. But someone is going to explain this. For the first time in my life, I realized my family wasn't hiding something from me. They had built an entire version of reality, without me even knowing it existed. And somewhere, behind all those polite smiles, someone had decided that the life meant for me would simply belong to someone else instead. She drove me back to my apartment in complete silence. Neither of us knew what came next. As I climbed the stairs to my third-floor unit, I looked around with different eyes. The peeling paint in the hallway. The buzzing fluorescent lights. The tiny mailbox held together with tape. For years, I'd convinced myself this place was temporary. That one day, if I kept working hard enough, life would finally reward me. I unlocked my apartment door. Oliver rubbed against my legs, demanding dinner as if nothing in the world had changed. I wished life were that simple. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table until nearly 3 in the morning. Grandma's letter lay open beside me. I read it again. And again. Every sentence hurt a little more. Not because she'd written anything painful, but because every word described a future someone had quietly taken away from me. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Mom. Coffee today? Just the two of us. No explanation. No mention of last night. No mention of Grandma's question. I agreed. I wanted answers. She was already waiting when I arrived at our usual cafe. Smiling. Relaxed. Almost cheerful. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed nothing had happened. She hugged me, ordered my favorite coffee before I could speak, then leaned forward. I've been thinking about your grandmother. I stayed quiet. I think she's starting to confuse old memories. There it was. The first lie. Only this time. I knew it was a lie before she finished saying it. Mom stirred her coffee slowly. She's been forgetting things for months. I looked directly at her. What house was she talking about? For the first time. Her spoon stopped moving. Only for a second. Then she smiled again. Oh, sweetheart. There never was a house. I let the silence stretch between us. Finally. I reached into my purse, pulled out the closing statement, and placed it on the table. Her smile disappeared. Color drained from her face. She didn't touch the paper. Didn't even look down. She already knew exactly what it was. I was with Grandma last night, I said quietly. I know everything. Neither of us moved. The cafe around us continued as normal. People laughed. Espresso machines hissed. Someone celebrated a birthday near the window. Meanwhile, my entire childhood was collapsing across a small wooden table. Mom finally sighed. It isn't as simple as you think. I almost laughed. It rarely is. She folded her hands. Emily needed that house. So you gave her mine? Her eyes hardened. You had a job. So did Emily. She had children. So? She was struggling. So was I. You were managing. Those 3 words echoed louder than anything else she'd said. You were managing. I repeated them slowly. So because I managed, you decided I didn't deserve it? Mom looked genuinely confused. No, Claire. You didn't need it. There it was. Not guilt. Not regret. Conviction. She truly believed she'd made the right decision. I've paid my own rent since I was 22. You know that. She nodded. I know. I worked holidays. I know. I skipped vacations. I know. I covered Dad's insurance paperwork. I know. I loaned Emily money after her divorce. I know. So when exactly did anyone ask me whether I wanted to keep surviving instead of simply managing? She looked away. Her answer never came. Instead, She whispered. Family helps the ones who need it most. I stared at her for several seconds. Then asked one question. The deed. Whose name is on it? She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Still, I wanted to hear her say it. Finally, she looked me in the eye. Emily's. The word landed with frightening calm. No anger. No shouting. Just certainty. The house was legally hers. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Not being held for me. Mine had become hers. The day the papers were signed. Without my knowledge. Without my permission. Without anyone believing I deserved to know. I stood up. Mom reached for my hand. Claire. Please don't make this bigger than it already is. I gently pulled my hand away. It became bigger. The day you decided my future belonged to someone else. I left my untouched coffee on the table. Behind me, Mom called my name. I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from an argument. I was walking away from the role I'd spent 35 years playing. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this story was only beginning. VidIQ.